Hey everybody, it's Francisco Kino. So chapter 8 is all about television, cable television, mobile video. Let's take a look first at history. So the idea of film was around, right? We knew that film was able to record an image and play it back, but the idea of doing this electronically and kind of combining some of the technology of radio to be able to not only transmit a sound recording, but also a video over the air from place to place was a fascinating thing. So early developments, Philo Farnsworth, Vladimir Zworykin were technicians who worked on this technology. I put Felix the Cat up there because they used models, obviously, to be their sit-in as they were doing the technology, and Felix was one of the early models. One of my favorite television programs too, growing up, Felix the Cat. So in the 40s, all television was live. It wasn't able to be recorded. So whatever you were watching, whether it was a soap opera or a commercial, everything was actually happening as you were watching it, kind of like news and sports is today. The only way to record things was to actually take a film camera and point it at the TV screen and get a poor quality recording out of that. And later in the 40s, the Ampex Corporation invented videotape, so that allowed things to be archived and also replayed at other times. Television took a pause during the war, so all the technology that was being used to develop and create television was now being used for the World War II efforts, and a lot of things actually were improved upon by the government and technology and war. And then after the war was over, there was a boom in television. So all that manufacturing that was manufacturing things for the war was now available to manufacture things for leisure time, and people had more expendable money and they were able to buy televisions and spend time watching them. So lots of early programming. There's interesting things in your book about the quiz show scandals. One of the interesting things about I Love Lucy was that Desi Arnaz and his wife Lucille Ball were innovators in broadcast television, and one of their big innovations was the idea of shooting in front of multiple cameras. So in a multiple camera studio, you had, say, 3 cameras, so as the performance was going on, you could switch from one camera to the other and have different points of view for the audience. Obviously in advertising, right? The idea that television could be sold and advertisers could buy time and get their message out to millions of consumers. So Nielsen was the big, rater here, and they used lots of different ways to figure out who was watching what when. And this is a diary that people were kind of just on their own, able to fill out. I don't know how accurate it was. People would oftentimes put that they were watching, more, kind of, esoteric programming or smart programming. Like I say, I was watching National Geographic when really I was watching a sitcom or something like that. So they weren't really that accurate. Then they came out with this idea of metering people. So you'd actually have a meter that would be sitting on your television monitoring what shows you were watching. So then, the inaccuracy with that was maybe you had left the meter running and you went to, do something else. So it was recording you were watching stuff that you really weren't watching. So then they came out with an actual camera in the meter, so it knew, that there was actually someone there watching. And, think about how evasive that might be. So ratings and share. So a rating is a number of all households tuned to a specific program based on all households that had television, so a much smaller number. The share was all houses tuned to a given program divided by all houses that were actually watching television at that time. So a share would definitely be a higher number. And again, these were things that the advertisers would have to pay for. So the higher the rating or share number, the more expensive the cost of the advertisement might be. So think about something like the Super Bowl, right? You have a lot of people watching, so that's why it costs millions of dollars just to air, a 30-second spot. Cable television. So this is a really interesting story. John Walson was a TV salesperson in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. And he was wondering why a lot of people, weren't buying TVs in certain regions. And the reason was that in the valleys, the signal couldn't go. The antenna really couldn't send the signal into these deep valleys in the Pocono Mountains. So he came up with this great idea, let me put a huge antenna on top of the mountain and then send a wire down that would then distribute the signal to everybody's homes so that they could buy my TVs. And this was the birth of cable television. And, a lot of people who couldn't get TV before were able to get TV this way. But, of course, this whole idea of cable opened up a whole nother realm of programming. So once the technology enhanced and evolved, we were able to put multiple channels on those cables. And, we still have it today. I have cable coming into my home, providing me, multiple channels of TV, phone, and also internet. Lots of legislation is involved. So the idea of programming in the public interest, and similar to radio, the ideas of putting together all of the public stations under one roof. So the PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service. I grew up watching Sesame Street and Channel 13 here in New York City. These were stations that had educational programming and no commercials. So, the idea that the government was funding them or membership was also funding them. Today, there's a lot of underwriting, and you even see commercials on Channel 13. It's an expensive proposition, obviously. So, producing and maintaining television is an expensive thing, but the reach is very powerful, and a lot of people watch, and therefore it's a great mass communications medium to spread news, information, entertainment, and also advertising. So there are, again, lots of independent stations, but the idea of the networks, so you had the powerful networks that were able to produce better quality programming, again, very similar to what happened in radio, and their affiliate stations then could benefit by that, being able to show this high quality programming that they didn't have to produce themselves. The networks benefited by having, again, larger reach so that they could reach more people and then, again, charge more for advertising. There might be some times when the networks were controlling, so this network time might be like the prime time between 7 and 9 o'clock at night, where the affiliates would turn over their broadcasting to the networks and they would get this high quality program, and then late night again they would have their own time slots. So they would show local programs that might not have the same kind of quality, but could also reach the local population and advertise with local community vendors and things like that. So you had this balance between network and local programming. Then things started changing with the idea of other types of transmission and other kind of vendors. So we're going to talk a little bit about HBO, but the idea of streaming services, obviously drastically changed the way we watch television. Syndication. So these were shows that were produced very high quality, expensive, very popular ratings, and then because they were so popular, they just had this very, very long life, and they trickled down to syndication, where they could be sold, at a cheaper rate because they were older, obviously, but still great programming. And the affiliates could run shows like MASH, and MASH was the most popular, but here are some other popular ones: Dallas, Roots, Gone with the Wind, all kinds of different shows that I grew up with too. The idea, I used to love watching MASH, and it was based on a movie, but the television series was even more popular than the movie. HBO began in 1975 with this idea of distributing by satellite, and the cable would the satellite would bring the signal down, and then HBO would send it out via cable. Again, lots of regulation here, controlling this. The idea that cable providers had to have local programming represented. So they had to carry, there was must-carry laws. They had to carry the local providers in there. So the idea of basic cable, right? You get your basic cable package. You're going to pretty much get the same programming that you would get on the air in there. And, these other tiers. So you might have, a couple of different tiers where you would pay more money and then get more kind of premium channels from that. Multiple system operators, so you could own multiple cables, and the idea that you would have somewhat of a monopoly, right, if you were controlling so many different kind of cables in there. So you had Time Warner and Cox Cable and Clear Channel Communications. So lots of different, again, ways that programming could be distributed. Today we have lots of different, availability to watch various things depending on your taste and, where you are. Netflix obviously is a big one. Amazon Prime right behind them. Very, kind of a battle for, viewership and how many people are going to be watching your programming. One of an interesting thing that definitely changed the whole feel of watching television was the video cassette recorder. So this allowed you to record programs when you weren't home. Had a timer in there, and you could record your favorite shows and then watch them at another time. So this is called time shifting. You could time shift your viewing. You could even do things like watch one program while you're recording another program. And then zipping. So this is something that advertisers weren't happy about. Zipping meant that you were watching your program, and as soon as the commercials came on, you'd press the fast forward button and zip through the commercials to get back to the programming. So definitely not the greatest thing for advertisers who were running their commercials there, and then you would be just zipping through their commercials. I watch most of my programming today with my Apple device or Roku, something like that, where, I really don't need those things anymore. I don't really need a cable box. I don't really need a VCR or a digital video recorder to time shift my viewing, because pretty much everything is available all the time through subscription services like Netflix, Hulu, Apple, and you can get all kinds of premium programming that way. Watch things on YouTube anytime you want. So again, the landscape is always radically changing. So here's again the idea of value in various service providers. Netflix started out by sending you DVDs in the mail. I don't know if they do that anymore, right? It's pretty much strictly online service these days. And then interactivity, right? So the idea that you could interact. Maybe I put on YouTube this morning, and before I watched my favorite cooking show, a survey came up asking me some questions. So again, they're able to survey and find out more about you through this kind of interactive two-way communication, right? So I'm not only sitting there passively getting information from YouTube, I'm actually able to provide information back to them. And then, of course, social media. So the idea of being able to almost be your own broadcaster, right? So you don't have to have the big network programming anymore. All I really need is my smartphone, and I can go live on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube and have my own following where, I can really do micro broadcasting or microcasting, where I can really have a niche kind of program and market, and it really services a very, very targeted kind of audience. But they're probably really interested. So, whatever I'm doing, I can have a really dedicated kind of audience who is very happy to, tune into my broadcasts, and also buy my services or buy products that I'm using. So again, if I'm doing a cooking show on Facebook Live, I may have, certain pots and pans that I use, or certain ingredients that would be able to be monetized through that narrowcast. And I'm going to leave you with this one, the idea of the news, how the news has really become entertainment, right? It's not so much hard news anymore. Maybe hard news has moved more towards, the idea of the papers like the New York Times. And if I really want hard news today, there's a lot of entertainment news, satirical news. It's real news, not fake news, but it kind of pokes fun at things, and the idea that even our regular kind of news broadcasts have an entertainment or an editorial kind of side to it. And then the interpretation. So the idea that, think about, the war that's going on in Ukraine these days, and how the same footage might be portrayed in your local news broadcast here in New York, as opposed to the news in Ukraine and the news in Russia. So a very different kind of point of view, the way that the media can take the same images and manipulate it to give a different message and a different point of view, which might be, again, a very interesting topic for your final paper and presentation, which I did put up today for you guys. So take a look at that. The final project is up and it's online, so don't wait. Take a look and get started on your research paper. You don't want to be in crunch time and wait till it's almost due to start doing it. So have a great week and watch some television.